We're going to continue here with the English Civil War. Last time we were talking about Charles II. The Stuart monarchy has been reestablished here in the late 17th century. We talked about briefly the English economy booming and the spread of colonies in the New World. So let's continue here with Charles II for a moment. Now he admired Louis XIV, the Sun King. He admired that sort of absolute rule in France established by Louis. Charles II also preferred Roman Catholicism to English Protestantism, so you can smell trouble coming here too. But Charles was ill-equipped to be a Sun King. His court was far less grandiose, far less imposing than Louis's court at Versailles. The English upper classes, much less dependent on royal patronage than they had been earlier, perhaps, under Elizabeth and the early Stuarts. The English upper class wanted direct political power, not the reflected glory of the English king, which again is in contrast to France, where the nobility attend to Louis XIV's every whim. So in England, fear of Catholicism still existed by the time of Charles II's death. Now, the last Stuart monarch, James II, will come to power. 3 years of exposure to James II touched off a new revolution against the Stuarts. We call this the Glorious Revolution. James II had alienated his initial support. He had dismissed his brother's ministers. He appointed Catholics to every conceivable government post. Since there were very few English Catholics to draw upon, James's appointees were generally untried and inferior men. James II, quote, "We cannot but heartily wish that all the people of our dominions were members of the Catholic Church." So you can see this ongoing, endless controversy between elite Catholicism and then the Protestantism of the mass of the English people. And then, June 1688, James's queen bore him a son. Ordinarily, this would be good news. It's not here, though, because here James has a son, an heir to the throne. This son is likely to be raised a Catholic, and the religious strife is going to continue. James already had 2 daughters, but the son will take precedent over the daughters, being male. So now the English Protestants are facing continued disaster with this Catholic heir to the Stuart monarchy. James's elder daughter was married to a Dutch prince, William of Orange. In June of 1688, the English Parliament allied themselves against James II. The king was more isolated than even Charles I had been back in 1640. Parliament did not want another full-scale war, however. So in the revolution of 1688-89, the Glorious Revolution, there's no Cromwell to rise up against the Stuarts. Instead, parliamentary opponents of James II invited William of Orange, just across the English Channel, to bring a foreign army to England and to restore English religion and the liberty of Englishmen. Very unusual. William of Orange accepted the invitation. It gave him leverage for bringing England into the coalition against Louis XIV. Louis XIV, of course, the absolute monarch of France, seeking to extend his territorial gains there in northwest Europe against the Dutch. William of Orange, resisting this French expansion, now has the opportunity to bring England in on his side against Louis XIV. So you can see this is a rather complex situation. Poor James is apparently paralyzed by this conspiracy against him. The new sovereigns accept Parliament's Bill of Rights, a sort of new Magna Carta of 1689. This listed the civil liberties of Englishmen. The Bill of Rights declared absolutist practices like those of the Stuart kings to be illegal. The Bill of Rights epitomized England's evolution into a constitutional monarchy, in which the king governed by parliamentary consent and was subject to law. So we can see here these two paths, absolutism in France, and then the move away from absolutism and towards constitutional monarchy in England, which of course is the point of all these lectures. I suppose, strictly speaking, the Glorious Revolution was a coup d'etat, that is, a takeover of the state. But in a wider sense, it marked the final victory for representative self-government in England, and that's really the key significance here. And of course, the other key significance is that it represents, this Glorious Revolution represents a victory for religious pluralism in England. The chief international consequence of the Glorious Revolution was that William III brought England into the League of Augsburg, which is the alliance against Louis XIV. So the year 1689 marks a major turning point in Anglo-French relations. Previously, between, say, the middle of the 16th century up until 1688, England and France had generally been at peace with one another, despite the fact that they're pursuing sort of different paths in how they govern their kingdoms. But now, beginning in 1688 and extending through 1815, the English and the French are going to be at each other's throats a lot. You think of the 7 Years' War, the American Revolution, the wars of the French Revolution, the Napoleonic Wars, on and on and on. England and France at each other's throats. No pair of adversaries had ever been better equipped for both English and French strength, had been tempered by 150 years of religious conflict. So these two societies are well prepared, both physically and mentally, for ongoing conflict and war now between the two of them. A couple of conclusions already stated, but bear repeating. This Glorious Revolution represents the end of religious conflict, religious strife in England, and it represents finally the establishment of a constitutional monarchy as opposed to an absolutist monarch. So we're going to stop there. That's a lot of stuff that we've talked about here over these past few lectures. So we'll stop there and we'll pick it up again next time. Thank you.